Was it? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I can hear, you can hear you
Yeah.
quite well. Now, I think what we should be doing when somebody makes has a question or somewhere, something,
Yeah.
you can't hear them.
Well, that's what I was fixing.
Okay, all right.
Because we should be able to hear you. That's why we have these mics. But what happened is, well, do you want the technical explanation? This might, okay. The short version is that this thing got plugged into the wrong port. Because on the soundboard, there's a send that goes to these speakers. So all the signals coming into the soundboard get sent out. And you can either go to these speakers, or there's a second send called a monitor send. And what I'm doing is I'm sending the monitor send to this, because then I can change the volume levels without affecting what you hear here.
Fascinating.
There you go. You want to run sound, Susan? I'm in need of people to run sound. All right. Okay, I think I started the stream. I did. Great. So, today's going to be the last day on hospitality. I made the decision this week. I felt like, sometimes I feel like we get to the point where it's like, okay, we get the idea. I can look at 15 more texts about the same thing, and we'll still have the same idea. Also, I remembered that at the beginning of the year, I had made a commitment that we were going to spend the year walking through the Pauline epistles, and we only did one. Then I got distracted. So what we're going to do next week is we're going to go back to looking at Paul's letters, and we're not going to go to 2 Corinthians. I want to maybe we'll come back to 2 Corinthians, but I want to do a different city. So we're going to do Paul's letter to the Galatians. And I don't think that's going to take too long, because I'm hopeful that I'm going to be able to make it through a few of Paul's letters this year. As before, we're not going to go through it line by line. We're going to pick sections out that are appropriate. So if you're interested and you want to read ahead, check out or start reading through Paul's letter to the Galatians. And if you get a chance, Wikipedia Galatia. Because what I'll be talking about next week is kind of giving us a little bit of a foundation on the context and the setting of Paul's letter to the Galatians. And I would just say as my pitch for this, actually, Paul's letter to the Galatians is one of my favorites of Paul's letters. Not necessarily in terms of the theology, but in terms of understanding what Paul is doing in that letter. Because Paul's letter to the Galatians is really the one that is addressing that Jew versus Gentile divide. And so there's some really neat things that he does in there. Anyhow, read through it as you get a chance. I mean, obviously we're not going to go through the whole thing next week. It's not as long a letter as, say, 1 Corinthians, but take it as you will. But today we're going to talk about hospitality, and specifically we're going to kind of bring it home in talking about the Last Supper. Well, more specifically, the ways in which Jesus shows hospitality, because the road we've been kind of following here, to give us a recap, is we talked about the concept of hospitality in the ancient world, how it differs from how it differs and how it is similar to how we practice hospitality today. And of course, the end goal, the final intent, was to talk about how hospitality in our practices has importance, but also can be how we can think about it differently, how it can be used. And from the standpoint of what we do on a regular basis, there is no more blatant way that we offer hospitality than in the meal, right? Than in the invitation to communion. And so I think it's very appropriate, especially since we just got done talking about the sacraments, it's very appropriate to kind of bring it back from there. So we're going to look at 3 different texts today that revolve around the meal. And one of the things that I would encourage you to think about, especially if I get bored, is what it looks like to view communion through the lens of hospitality being offered. And so we're not going to spend a ton of time in these 3 texts, because what I want to do in the last 15 minutes or so is kind of do that, is kind of think about communion through the lens of hospitality, both from a theological standpoint, but from a practical standpoint. So, when we gather around the table and, and kind of fun mental exercise too. Oh, it's a long story here in the sermon. I got a new pole saw this week.
I know what?
Pole saw? It's a saw at the end of the pole. Because I have several trees in our backyard whose branches are hanging over and shading me.
So when you come to my house, bring it.
Yeah. Well, so I've been waiting a week to get to use it, and I overdid it a bit yesterday. I was out in the sun all day, and I cut down some really big branches. And I'm a big, strong man. I can carry these all over the place. And I woke up this morning, my back was sore, my shoulders are sore, I'm tired. Anyways, so if I pause momentarily, it's because I'm collecting my thoughts. Okay, first text we're going to look at is 26. Oh yeah. Here, I can get it to you. Who needs Bibles? Yeah, do them over there.
You have to come to us.
Yeah, we're looking at Matthew 26. Here are Bibles for those of us just coming in. Voila. Here, I'll write it down so you're. Well, we're not going to read the whole thing.
Oh, why not?
I didn't say first.
So I put 17 through 25 in parentheses because it's not, I'm going to read it just to give us context, but the verses we're going to focus on are 26 through 30 because that is the story. There we go. Okay, those are the three passages we're going to talk about. So hopefully this is familiar. This is one we get quite often. But this is Matthew's account of the Last Supper. And so I'm going to read 17 through 25 to give us context, and then but the verses we're going to look at are 26 through 30. On the first day of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus, saying, "Where do you want us to make the preparations for you to eat the Passover?" He said, "Go into the city to a certain man and say to him, 'The teacher says, my time is near. I will keep the Passover at your house with my disciples.'" So the disciples did as Jesus had directed them, and they prepared the Passover meal. When it was evening, he took his place with the 12 disciples, and while they were eating, he said, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me." And they became greatly distressed and began to say to him one after the other, "Surely not I, Lord." He answered, "The one who has dipped his hand into the bowl with me will betray me. The Son of Man goes as it is written of him, but woe to that one by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for that one not to have been born." Judas, who betrayed him, said, "Surely not I, Rabbi." He replied, "You have said so." While they were eating, Jesus took a loaf of bread, and after blessing it, he broke it, gave it to the disciples, and said, "Take, eat, this is my body." Then he took a cup, and after giving thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you, for this is my went out among balls. I'm always curious what the hymn
Well, it's
was.
gotta be the Jewish, something to deal with Satan.
You mean it's not a mighty fortress is our God? the hymn, it's on the hymn. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, fascinating question. I'll never have an answer to, but that's okay.
Well, just a minute, I'll look it up.
But it's not going to tell you. It's not going to tell you anything. And if it does, it's pure conjecture based off of some historical evidence. So familiar words, yeah. And when we read 1 Corinthians, which we actually just looked at a couple of months ago, is effectively a repetition of these words in Matthew, but it's important to still read. So what's the setting? Well, yeah.
An upper room in a house on Passover in Jerusalem.
On Passover in Jerusalem, yeah. What does a Passover meal look like?
Seder.
Seder, yeah, potentially, yeah.
Bitter herbs. It's a traditional,
Yeah,
there's a whole story that goes with all
Sure.
the dishes. The mortar, which is
yeah,
this, and the parsley, which is that, and
yeah.
the bitter herb.
And obviously the thing that I'm curious about is how much did the Last Supper preparations of the disciples resemble how much did the Passover preparations of the disciples resemble Passover celebrations, Seder celebrations?
There are 4 songs that are sung at Passover.
Sure.
I can't pronounce any of them. One is celebrating gratitude, one is the 4 questions.
Yeah,
The next one is who knows one, and an allegorical tale.
okay.
So it could be any of those.
I'm going to go out and then probably say it probably wasn't any of those. Just in terms of I don't know I don't know how much of that has survived in the modern era. And that's me being pessimistic as well too. Could be. But what are the bitter herbs? What was the meal that was shared during the Passover? Right. What are the 2 big components of that? Unleavened bread and leaven. Right. Those are the 2 pieces. So what's interesting here is when we get to the breaking of the bread, we can make a couple of assumptions, which is that this is likely the end of the meal. You get a sense of that? Is that kind of the vibe that you get from this? If they've already dined, and perhaps they've participated in whatever Passover traditions, but they're also he's breaking unleavened bread, which is one of the reasons that's traditionally what we use for communion. We use unleavened bread because we are, in a lot of ways, sharing in the Passover meal, if that makes sense. Yeah. But what does Jesus do? If you pay attention to his actions here, what does he do?
He spoke.
He spoke. Yeah. He's describing what he's doing.
Don't eat, this is my body.
Yeah. This is my body.
But he specifically had a comment to Judas.
Yeah. Beforehand. Yeah. About the betrayal. Yeah. Which isn't necessarily directly influencing the thoughts on hospitality, but just kind of generally, it's so fascinating. What it's like to eat dinner with somebody that you know is going to proverbially stab you in the back.
Who would do that?
Yeah, I know. Who is calm, cool, and collected enough?
Yeah.
And the line I get a kick out of, when Judas says, surely it's not I. Is it? Jesus says, you have said so. There's so many times I want to say that to people. I'm not a crook. You have said so. Sorry, Nixon reference there. But notice the actions of Jesus. So he's breaking the bread. What is one of the things he does? We do this. I guarantee he did not make the sign of the Trinity when he blessed the bread. I'm curious what his hand gestures might have looked like, in that case. He shares the wine. So you'll notice, right? We don't just pull this out of anywhere. When we participate, when we do communion, when I'm presiding over the meal, I am in many ways so let's put our hospitality lenses on here. Number one, who is offering the hospitality in this story? It's complicated. There's not one answer here.
Simon owns the house.
Whoever's house it is. Yeah, a certain man.
Oh, I thought it
It doesn't say Simon. It says, now there is a certain man. Yeah. Go into the city to a certain man and say to him, the teacher says, my time is near. I will keep the Passover at your house with my disciples. So, and of course there's a lot of conjecture over who that certain man is in this case. I don't think it's meant to be a mystery. It's this interesting question of, is it one of the 70? Is it a friend that Jesus had in Jerusalem? Is it a family member? There are a lot of answers here. I don't know that Matthew is trying to cause us consternation. I think more it's Matthew doesn't feel that is important in this case. But so there's a certain man. So from our understanding of hospitality, and I'm putting words into our mouths here, is it not that man who would be offering hospitality in this case?
Was there a certain gesture, like with the hand, to bless someone that was used in that era?
Something like this. Yeah.
But that was.
Not this. Well, because a blessing in the Hebrew context is often an anointing.
Yes.
So it would be anointing with oil, which oil or water might be poured over the head, in which case, it's not so dissimilar from what we do, right? Has anybody participated in a ceremony of laying on of hands?
I have.
We've done it here at Milwaukee before, yeah. My guess is that not much has changed. that the touching is important. Or Jesus might have been, hand up, hovering up. You'll see in a lot of icons and paintings of Jesus, he's doing this, right? The hand upraised.
Yes.
Or later into Renaissance, it's like this, one of those. It's a lot of weird hand gestures that they make Jesus do in those paintings. Whatever was popular in the day, I guess. But what's interesting about this is that theoretically, the person who would be offering hospitality in this place, according to the traditions that we understand, is the host, is the person who owns the space. So theoretically, they would have been providing food as well as the space, but that person is seemingly absent from this conversation, or at least from this image. But one of the things that's interesting here, and we'll see this in Luke 24, is kind of the reversal of hospitality that Jesus does, to where even though it is a certain man who's offering hospitality, who would have provided and prepared for the Passover meal, in the end it's Jesus who presides over the meal, right? It is him who offers his blessing to those that are gathered. And this for me is something that is really fascinating in terms of how we think about what we're doing when we celebrate the meal, which is that it is not monodirectional, right? It is not just us. It's not just us offering food. I think one of the ideas that's inherent in there, again coming from this lens of hospitality, is this concept of mutual blessing. Also, thinking of it in terms of Jesus offering hospitality, it really kind of changes the impact of these words. This is my body, which I give to you. Because again, if we're seeing it through the lens of hospitality, what do we offer? So in the texts that we've read, what are the expectations of the host? Shelter, safety, meal, and time, right? What does it mean for Jesus to say, I'm giving you my body? Right? As the host, I'm giving you my body. Can we not tie in that concept of both meal and safety and shelter? This is a really interesting way to think about it, I think, which is, this is my body given for you. This is my body that I offer to you for sustenance, for safety, and for shelter. Right? This is all that I'm offering. Jim.
Yeah, and that sort of ties into my, of the divine hug. Give me your body is almost all those things, whereas it's the divine hug of God, of Jesus, that you are unconditionally loved.
Yeah.
And if you, of course, we interpret it as a physical body and blood, and that's fine too. But is this really an expansion of the Passover theology?
Absolutely.
Is it a reinterpretation or an expansion of?
I think it is absolutely an extension. I mean, because after all, what does the Passover meal offer? Protection from death, right? And again, there are so many ways in which the Passover metaphor extends beyond just communion, right? So the imagery from Revelation is this is the Lamb who was slain, and it is the Lamb's blood that is put on the lintel of the door at Passover to protect from the angel of death. It is also the Lamb's flesh, which needs to be eaten in its entirety, right? That's part of that. That's part of the Passover tradition. Not a scrap should remain come morning. So yes, is the short answer to that.
Sort of the beginning of grace, if you will. Somewhat.
Well, or the extension of grace. Yeah, the extension of grace. Yeah, I mean, we share a lot more in common with our Jewish sisters and brothers than we often think. The Passover meal is not all that different from communion practices.
Other than the fact that it was a full meal.
Yeah, you guys don't get as much food on Sunday morning, do you? We're kind of cheapskates, aren't we?
We get more here.
Yeah, depends who's giving you the bread, too. I'm very cognizant of not giving chokeable pieces to people. I have known pastors in the past who have been very generous with the portions, which always feels awkward to me because I'm like, is it okay for me to eat this in multiple bites, right? Or do I have to try and choke it down before I get a half ounce of wine? That's not going to wash it down, buddy. I don't know what everything's going on here. Like, can I go back for seconds to help?
But the bread that you serve, is not unleavened.
Yes, it is.
Is it?
Yeah, it's absolutely unleavened.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
There are zero leavening agents in that bread. It is not, it's not pita bread as we think of it, but it is unleavened. And I know this because I attempted to make bread and I forgot the leavening agent, and it came out looking a lot like that. Didn't taste nearly as good, but it definitely looked like that. What do you think of this? And I don't know this is necessary. Well, okay, hold on, let me back up. What do you make of the phrase blood of the covenant?
Was that in here?
Yeah, it says, for this is the blood of the covenant, which is poured out for the many for the forgiveness of
Oh, I see
sins.
it, yeah. So what is the covenant, is that your question?
What do you make of the phrase blood of covenant, blood of the
The
covenant?
sacrifices
Yeah.
over the years that you made to fulfill God's promises.
Sure, Susan, I saw you.
Well, didn't they sacrifice or send a goat into the desert to take all their sins?
The scapegoat?
Scapegoat.
Yeah, on which you put your skates. Yeah. There is a not myth. That's the wrong word. There's the idea of a tradition wherein you would paste or stick the list of your sins upon a goat and you send it out in the wilderness on the assumption that it was going to die, and then all your sins are out there in the wilderness with the goat instead.
That was still available.
With that, are scapegoats still
Yes.
available?
Could we get one, or we're out of luck?
I think if we did that, we might get a call from the SPCA. Just throwing that out there.
Well, the blood of the covenant could also refer to the original Passover where they were instructed.
Sure.
That's true.
Sure. And again, as with a lot of questions I ask, there's not an end answer here, right? This is all about, coming up with more questions. But looking at it through this lens of hospitality, again, what is significant here is, historically speaking, the blood of the covenant from a First Temple understanding would have been the blood of whatever animal was sacrificed. In this case, Jesus is both the host and the sacrifice. This is my blood given for you. Right? These are the words that we say. And I'm not telling you anything that you probably don't already know, right? This is not divided hospitality. And having read, the story of Abraham and the angels, having read the negative example of Sodom, and the inhospitality of those people, the significance then of one of the central practices of our faith is hospitality taken to the extreme. It is our who we celebrate as our divinity, saying, I am the host and the meal. I am all in this case.
Did Moses use those same words when after the journey and the covenant between God and
Not necessarily. I can't remember what we talked about this. The idea of the meal in terms of the Passover, that would have been a tradition that carries on through, but this kind of ritualized meal and covenant, I don't know that Moses would have presided over anything in that regard. It's a really interesting question. And you're getting into the fascinating part of this is how long does it take for Passover theology to develop to the point where it resembles what it looks like in Jesus' time? Again, we have no answer to this, right? Are there Passover practices amongst the Hebrew people while they are wandering in the wilderness? We don't really get any recognition of that. It doesn't pop up. We don't hear the story about the Hebrew people celebrating the second Passover, right? It's not in there, which bears the question. Probably have to ask somebody who's actually a Jewish scholar. Is the Passover celebration something that predates the second temple or the first temple? And I don't know the answer to that. I'll ask my friends. They probably know. All right, let's we're just gonna pop into 1 Corinthians really quick. We get just a little bit of a variation on this.
Jesse,
Yeah.
I was gonna ask it, how did it come about that wine is representing? What can supplement?
Well, because it was wine that was being offered by Jesus, but the thing that we miss out on a lot of times is because water wasn't safe to drink. By and large, there's no water purifiers in the ancient world, no water treatment facilities, and so a lot of times what people would drink was either watered down wine or watered down beer. Or that being said, that's a really fascinating question. Is how safe was the water to drink in towns with Roman aqueducts? Because it's theoretically spring-fed water. But then again, that's going to the baths. It's not necessarily, you'd be drawing water or well, I don't know. But wine is a very common thing to drink, not specifically for the purposes of intoxication, but because it was safe. It was safe. The little alcohol that was in it was enough to make sure you didn't get giardia.
I would imagine if you had your well, that's the only safe one.
Yeah, and even then, it's tough. Because they would have been open wells, right? So you're not, that was a very common tactic in sieges, is to poison the well of the enemy, throw a dead animal in it.
Well, the other thing about wells in, say, a small town or urban area, is that people probably had some sort of outhouses they were using. And even into the 1800s,
Yeah.
there were outbreaks in cities
Yeah.
in America of cholera and stuff
Yeah.
like that, coming from those outhouses into the wells
Yeah.
that people were using. So
Yeah.
it's not even an ancient.
Before we really understood the consequences of planting waste facilities too near to groundwater sources.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not lie.
And think about it, if you're
Love in the time of cholera.
yeah, exactly. If you're a person that lived up until maybe the late 19th century, your ability to dig a well was dependent on you being able to get down there.
Being physically how far down you could there's no guy that comes with a big drill and pipe machine,
Right.
right? Which is fascinating. Has anybody ever watched that being done? A couple of times, because I was there when we had our well drilled. We didn't have a new well drilled because we were pulling out my grandparents, and then we got our own well. That big bump, 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 bump. That's pretty cool. Anyways, yeah.
When his dad used to do that.
He was a well driller.
Not professionally, but he could drill a well.
He had a dowsing rod.
He put the car up with one wheel up there and rig up this little thump, thump, thump system.
Running off the car.
Running off a car. And,
I love it.
yeah,
I love it. But Ruby, to answer your question directly, I think too, it's not just that it was the drink that was available, but there's definitely a metaphor of the color, reminding you of blood. I mean, that was ubiquitous, wine and blood and the relation there between. Yeah, that's an interesting question. All right, I'm just going to read this passage in 1 Corinthians, then we're going to hop to Luke 24, and then we're going to kind of wrap up. This is Paul's recollection of the institution of the Lord's Supper. 1 Corinthians 11, 23-26 is where I'm at. For I received from the Lord what I also handed on to you, that the Lord Jesus, on the night when he was betrayed, took a loaf of bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it, and he said, "This is my body that is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way he took the cup also after supper, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and you drink the cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes." Not quite an exact word-for-word quotation of Matthew. There is some discrepancy in there, but by and large, I think Paul captures the general gist of what Jesus is saying. We've got this is the new covenant shed in my blood. We have the concept of forgiveness of sins. This is my body broken for you. Words that we hear on Sunday morning quite frequently. The line that has always stood out to me is, "In this way we celebrate the Lord's death until he comes," which I try to remember to say every once in a while as my pre-communion blessing. I tend to add things depending on what kind of our theme is of the day. But you will hear a lot of pastors, if they're not reading the invitation to communion that comes straight out of Sundays and Seasons, they will say, "For in this day we celebrate the Lord's death until he comes." Or, "When we eat of this bread and drink of this cup, we celebrate the Lord's death until he comes." Again, a lot of ways. What do you make of that? It doesn't say death and resurrection. We celebrate the Lord's death until he comes.
In Matthew, he alludes to his death.
He does.
Said, "I'm never going to drink again."
Yes.
I had not noticed that.
Yes. I shall never again drink of this cup until. Yeah. What do you make of that phrase from a hospitality perspective? I know, isn't it? Yeah, it's a bit of a downer. It's like, well, thanks for coming over for dinner, but I'm going to die tomorrow. Yeah, a bit of a downer. But how many, think about this. What do we offer to death row inmates? A last meal. A last meal. How many of you have had a meal recognizing that there is probably one person around the table that you won't dine with again?
Yeah, what?
Yeah.
What's the last part?
That there's one person at your table, one or more gathered at your table for whom this is the last time you're going to get a chance to sit down and eat with them. Yeah.
You never know.
You never know. Isn't that the truth? Yeah, you never know. Yeah, which is the tragedy of life. Is looking back and saying, if I had known that this is the last time, I would have done things differently. Thanksgiving and Christmas are the two toughest times, isn't it? Because that's the time when you're hopefully going to have your family around you, but when you don't have that person there anymore, it changes the dynamics of the table, isn't it? Yeah. Good insight, Kizzy. I think that this is Jesus, Paul, because you might notice if you're reading along that the quotation marks are Jesus's, which are not in the original text, but where the scholars think that Paul is finishing quoting Jesus, and before that line, and so the last line is technically or theoretically Paul's instruction to those who are reading the letter, saying, "For in this way we celebrate the Lord's death until he comes." Right? And what Paul is effectively And again, there's no right answers here. I'm just encouraging us to think about it through that lens of what it means to offer hospitality. Okay, let's pop to our last text, Luke 24, and we're going to jump straight down to verses 36 to verse 36. We just had this text not so long ago. I wrote down 28 to 35, but that's not what I wanted to write down. Oh, no. Yeah, that is what I want. I want 28 to 35, not 36. Never mind. 28 to 35. I was not crazy.
At that moment.
So you say.
What proof do we have?
Yeah. Well, sorry. You'll laugh when we get to the sermon because that's actually one of the things that's a theme that's in there. Okay. So this is the road to Emmaus. The disciples, two disciples have bumped into a stranger on the road. A stranger who turns out to be Jesus. They don't recognize him, and Jesus invites himself to walk with them and is explaining things to them along the way. Because there's that line that I love. Are you the only stranger in all of Jerusalem not to know the things that have occurred? They call Jesus a stranger. And so finally, they get to the village. So as they came near the village to which they were going, they, being the two disciples, he walked on ahead. Jesus walked on ahead as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is evening and the day is now nearly over." Where does this line filter into? Which of our liturgies? Stay with us now for this evening, from Holden's evening prayer. Yeah, we hear this line. Stay with us for now, for it is evening and the day is almost over. And so he went in to stay with them. Who is offering hospitality here? The disciples. Yeah, the two that are walking. They are the ones offering hospitality. And this is this awesome reversal. So when he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed it, and again, whatever that looks like, probably wasn't doing this, blessed it and broke it and gave it to them. Not all that dissimilar from what we just talked about, is it? So, and again, you got to get the one thing they always advise us against is don't mix gospels, right? So we were reading from Matthew, now we're in Luke. But if we're trying to create a unified timeline here, the Last Supper has already happened. The disciples, and again, we tend to think of it as the 12 because that's what the painting looks like. That's what Da Vinci's painting looked like. But chances are the meal was probably being shared with more than just the 12 disciples. It might have been some of the extended family there, so to speak. So what I'm saying is these two might have been at the Last Supper, even though they aren't part of the 12. So he does something which is almost exactly what he does at the Last Supper. He takes bread, gives thanks, and breaks it, which also might have been a traditional way of the host opening a meal as well too. Okay? So what I'm saying is Jesus didn't necessarily invent this in the Last Supper. However, what's significant from this story is that is the way that the disciples recognize Jesus is in that breaking of bread. So he went to the table, he took bread, blessed it, and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. And they said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scripture to us?" That same hour they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11, because Judas is gone, and the companions gathered together. They were saying, "The Lord has risen indeed, and he has appeared to Simon." Then they told what had happened on the road and how he had been made known to them in the breaking of the bread. That line has always confused me. He has appeared to Simon. I don't know if one of the disciples' names was Simon. I don't think it was Simon Peter. I don't know. Your own mileage may vary there. But providing the shelter and the meal. And then Jesus does this thing at the end where he reverses that and he says, this is my body given for you. This is my blood shed for you. You know, we talked about how that the offering of his body and blood might be seen as a way of offering all the things that we expect out of a host, which is shelter, safety, and food, and time and conversation. Now we have Jesus again reversing the hospitality expectations, where the two disciples specifically have said, stay with us, share space with us, eat with us. And as they sit down, Jesus is the one who picks up the bread, breaks it, and offers hospitality. And it's the disciples who, in that offering of hospitality, recognize the resurrected Jesus, right? To the extent where we're not our hearts burning within us while we were walking there. Again, I could preach 15 sermons just on that line because of this idea of like our brains didn't recognize it, but something else recognized it. If only we had listened to that instead of this, or however you want to think about it. Okay, we got 7 minutes left. 9 minutes. It's 10:21. The clock's a little bit fast. What does it mean to offer hospitality in the church?
Greeting people as they walk in the front door.
Well, I mean, raise my board so I can write things down. And as we kind of talk about these things, think of their corollaries in ancient hospitality practices. So, you know, is it the same? Is it different? What are the parallels? Greeting. And think too, what do you do when you invite somebody over to your house? What do those initial first 5 minutes look like? You know?
You orient them to the bathroom.
Where's the bathrooms?
Yeah.
They haven't visited before. You want a tour of our house? That's what we've been doing for the past 6 years. This is the first house that we've ever owned, and we want to show it off to people, even though it's usually dirty. but where are the bathrooms? Where's, if you need anything, it's in
Can I
here.
offer you a drink?
What are you doing? What are you doing in that?
Being comfortable.
Hospitality, which is making it comfortable, right? It's making people feel like this is their home for the time that they're there. Paula.
Offering to take their coat or hat or lay down their weapon, something like that.
Yes, leave the swords outside the door, please. Yeah. What's the corollary? So think about this in terms of how we offer hospitality in church. Are we doing the same thing? Yeah, we should be.
I really appreciate how you walk people through the service we have, because it's hard to navigate when you're a stranger. And it's unusual that you do it every Sunday and do it so consistently.
I would love to pat myself on the back for that. This is just the reality of the 21st century as well, too, is, 60 years ago the expectation was that everybody already knew everything. And you wouldn't show up at a Lutheran church unless you were Lutheran, so why would we need to explain anything to you? Thankfully, that's no longer the case. And it's also just that we are all, this is that fun role reversal, is that there is a both and going on here. Is when we think about anything having to do with hospitality, in our church, kind of the automatic assumption is that we are the ones. But what does Jesus do over and over again? Is he takes it, and he does this. He reverses it. And so we are also being reminded that even though we might do this as our church, and we are offering greetings we are orienting people to our home, what's the thing that I say? This is the table that our Lord has prepared. This is actually, we are all guests at the home of Jesus today, in this moment. So it's a both end. It's a both end. Because I think it is extremely helpful for us to think about as members of this faith community, as members of this home, how do we make people feel like this is their home, at least for the next hour or so? So what else do we do? Greeting, we take people's coats, Kizzy. We have treats. We offer food. Thank you, Kizzy. Yes, we offer food and coffee. Thank you, Ruby, and all the hands that prepare our snacks and coffee every day? Yes, Matt?
Well, we've greatly expanded in the last few years our availability for space for community groups. So just Friday, we had the Portland Waldorf School orchestra over here. And at the end of the month, we're having a choir from Westwood because we use the church for 3 days. And we have these blood drives and all this kind of stuff going on. So, you know, that actually takes a lot of work. I mean, I've been heavily involved in this, and it's surprising how much it takes to put all that together, you know, us and the council.
So we had the Waldorf School in here on Friday, and they showed up with a rock band, which was not necessarily what we anticipated, but it is what it is. And so Dylan was on site. Dylan Dan Hoffman was on site, kind of handling everything. I had gone in on Friday and prepped the mics and all the things for him and left him instructions and all that jazz. And so he had that all figured out. But then, of course, there's inevitably more things that arise. They had brought in a drum set, and they're like, well, do you have like a plastic, sound barrier? No, we don't have a plastic sound barrier. Number one, no, we don't have one. We don't have a drum set. But number two, they're not going to work in that space. Sound goes up, it's going to bounce off the hard ceiling, it's going to bounce up. It's not going to help at all, but hey, whatever. So Dylan, after the night was over, he said the funniest thing. He said, that just felt like I hosted a house party for 200 people where I was the only adult. I was like, yes, that's exactly what it feels like. Not that people are disrespectful, but it's like it's the definition of herding cats, where this isn't their home, right? They don't know the space, and it's not that they're instinctively disrespectful, but like, have you ever invited people over and you're like, don't do that, don't sit there, don't touch that. One of Ellen's horror stories is before we were living together, she had an apartment over in Hillsborough, and she invited some work friends over, and one couple brought their like 3-year-old child. And my wife, it's a good thing, is much more cognizant of the time and money we've invested in our things than I am. I'm bad. I'm just like, whatever, there's a couch. And so she had a brand new couch, and this kid had hands covered in Nutella and was jumping up and down the couch. And I don't remember what she said, how that turned out, but to this day, she lies awake at night with nightmares of that, right? But it's like, oh man, this isn't your space, but I want you to feel at home. But also, if this is going to be your home, let's follow the rules that, anyways. Yeah. But this is taking this, on the side. We tend to think of the hospitality we provide as simply within the hour and a half on Sunday morning. But if we're thinking about this as our home, or by extension as the table which Christ prepares for us, as we ponder what hospitality means to us, man, what does it mean to provide hospitality outside of Sunday morning? Both in terms of people who come in, when we're functioning as an office space, right, needing to do business with the church, or in people that are using our space, community partners whose ministry, and an expansive understanding of that word, whose ministry we support, because, doing choir concert for kids is a ministry, just, different type of language, It's fascinating. It's fascinating. What are the other things we do? Go ahead.
Well, I think another aspect of it is our outreach programs.
Yeah.
We've got, backpack buddies and all the stuff that Linda does for the Christmas presents and that kind of thing. And I mean, we've got to really, if you take a step back and look at all the things Milwaukee Lutheran Church is involved with partnering up with Club One is another one, homeless outreach.
The cultures.
These are all part of our community hospitality mission.
And what are we offering? Okay? What are we bringing to backpack buddies? Food. What are the cultures giving people?
Comfort.
Shelter, blanket, shelter, safety, comfort, right? What are, loved one literally provides housing, So, this is the fun part about this, is you can look at everything that we do now through the lens of offering hospitality, extending our greeting and our welcome, providing safety, food, comfort, and warmth. Whether or not people actually step foot into our facilities, right? And I could do 4 more classes. Well, let me put it, I could talk for 4 more hours about this, which is why we're switching to a different topic next week. Just thinking about the duality of when we offer hospitality, we're also opening ourselves to Christ's hospitality and vice versa, right? Because one of the things that we said at the beginning is that quotation from whichever one of Paul's letters that I already forgot. In offering hospitality, we have inadvertently, invited angels into our midst. And so when we offer hospitality, we are experiencing Christ's hospitality. Because how many times have you invited somebody into your space only for them to be welcoming to you, right? Only for them to by reverse, provide hospitality to you. Too many times to count, right? Too many times to count. All right, I'm out of juice. Okay, so if you didn't hear, next week we're gonna switch topics. We're going back to the promise that I made at the beginning of the year, which is we're gonna look at some of Paul's letters. So next week we're gonna pick up with Paul's letter to the Galatians. So if you would like to start reading ahead, pick up a Bible and start reading Galatians. I don't know how many weeks we're gonna take, but we're not going to be walking through it line by line as we did with 1 Corinthians. We're going to take a look at different sections out of it. So, cool. See you in worship. Thank you, folks. Happy Mother's Day. I'll repeat myself again when we get